Ready, set, go!
And the truth shall set you free!
Welcome to One Life Radio.
We are going higher, everyone. Welcome to the One Life Radio podcast. We are live from our home studios, unedited, raw, real, discussing your having your best life. You do only have one life, and we've got Dr. DeWone Bennett with us today. So glad to have him with us. How you doing, Dr. D?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be on the podcast with you guys. I'm excited about our discussion.
I know, me too. And let me tell everybody what it is, because this is something that's very timely, and I think everyone will want to at least listen in and maybe, I don't know, have some sort of awakening or not, or create more hate or not. And we've got Marie Early with us as well. She's my Ed McMahon over there.
Yep.
I love it. Hey,
my gosh. Well, it's great to be here. It is. I love hearing that music in my ears. And we've got DeWone Bennett, as I said, Dr. DeWone Bennett. He is a licensed professional counselor, and I've got your new bio. So Dr. DeWone Bennett is a licensed professional counselor and counseling supervisor with more than 15 years of mental health practice and experience. Dr. Bennett has a doctorate in clinical psychology, and over the past 15 years, DeWone has focused his interest in personal development on those struggling with emotional trauma, relationship issues, resiliency, and work-life balance. As the owner of a group private practice in North Dallas, here in the North Dallas area, DeWone continues to provide life-altering behavioral health services and consultations. His motto is, the key to successful navigation through life is to master self-awareness and emotional control by helping you learn to help yourself. I love that. And I love being on the air with you always, Dr. Bennett. I'm going to have to get used to that. And you and Vaughn started at the same time on the show, and now he's a doctor, you're a doctor. How beautiful is that?
Yeah, think about that, right? We've been able to go to the show and we've been able to grow. And I always tell people that, it was an honor in my early stages of moving to Texas to be able to be brought on the show and talk about all these great and important topics with you guys. And I think that One Life has been somewhat responsible for my ability to continue on to pursue my PhD. So thank you for being part of the journey with me.
Oh yeah. And me too. I'm not a doctor, maybe the doctor of love. Could I be a doctor of love?
Look, on this show, we discuss all things life. So you're just the doctor of life, right?
The doctor of life. There you go. And I've got my dog Love between my legs here in the studio. He was so happy when he saw us coming upstairs today because, that was his regular routine for a while. And so Love is very happy. Love the dog. Okay, so let's continue with this. Our topic today is how to navigate through the political war between the left and the right and the black and the white. Okay, so DeWone, I'm going to start with this. What are the psychological reasons for extremism in politics? What are they based in?
I think they can stem from various psychological factors. I think they're often rooted in these very complex individual societal dynamics, right? When you're thinking about why we have some of the extremism, you look at it as far as people want to belong and identify with something, right? It is our human instinct nature to want to belong to some group. I think we although we do value individualism in some aspects, I think one thing that we do value more is kind of group identity. So I think a lot of our extremism when it comes to political things are not more so your individual beliefs and preferences, but people tend to identify and adopt the beliefs and the values of their group. So you see that people tend to vote against their own, their own needs, right? And a lot of it is because they're not aware of what they're actually voting for or against. They're aware of what their group is saying is necessary, as well as fear and uncertainty. I think there's a lot of fear, particularly within our media. You see a lot of fear mongering and things of the nature. So a lot of people have a lot of fear of what's happening, and they're just looking for solutions of people that they think can resolve it. And again, based on my premise, my view, and how I view issues, I may feel like there's one side that's better at resolving or helping with my fears versus the other.
You know, something I read this just this morning, and I thought, wow, I'm going to ask DeWone this because, okay, so I'm white, you're black. Okay, you're a doctor, I'm not. Did that rhyme? Anyway, it says that since 2016, when Donald Trump won the presidency, while simultaneously stoking racial anxieties and bucking Republican orthodoxy on taxes and same-sex marriage, it has become clear that what Americans think about politics can't be really understood without knowing what they think about racism and what, if anything, they want to do about it. What do you think about that statement?
I think there's so much you got to think about for Black people, why politics is so emotionally evoking, right? I think there were policies that basically said that Black people were 1/5 of a person. There were rules, laws, regulations that said that Black people were less than a man. Black people were not able to own land, to own homes. It was illegal for Blacks to become educated, right? So although that was during the slavery era and it was long ago, what was not too long ago was Blacks' inability to vote. Blacks, so I think that when you think about who's, commander in chief in this country, if that person is somebody who the African American community feel is anti equity, anti-justice, growth, then I think that always will invoke some sense of fear in people. Speaking earlier when I talked about why we have political extremism, a lot of it, again, was because of that people are fearful. So I think when you have a political rhetoric that may seem as if, hey, it's going away from Black issues, then I think you may see that you get a lot more of emotional reaction, which can contribute to the divide, the anger, and the frustrations that you see between the Black community, in some cases the white community, or the Black community, in some cases Trump supporters.
Do you think it's clear? Do you think it's possible that that we can become a nation? Maybe not right away. Or let me rephrase this. There are people out there. Okay, I'll speak for myself. I believe that I don't have a racist bone in my body. Okay, I wasn't raised like that. When I first moved to Dallas, and so, what did you? Were you about to say something, DeWone?
Oh, no, that wasn't me. I was just listening.
Oh, okay. And so I don't believe that I do. I wasn't raised like that. My mother and father were very just open to everyone, and so what do you think about that? Is that possible for someone to not? I don't feel like you're racist at all. When we've been friends for a long time, we've recorded a lot of shows together. I have never seen you demonstrate any kind of racism, reverse racism towards white people.
I don't think necessarily. I think it's possible. And I think there are a significant amount of people in this world who aren't racist. What I do think is that I think that by human nature, though, we can be prejudiced and discriminatory. So what I mean by that is I think that it's important for people to understand that seeing color is a good thing, right? Yeah. Because when people say, well, I don't see color, well, then if you don't see color, you're probably not recognizing and understanding that there are laws, rules, and regulations that are directed towards people of color. So I need you to see that there are differences in how people are treated, in the same way that I need you to see the differences in gender. But I don't think that there are people who are inherently discriminatory simply because of race. Now, you may have people that they're discriminatory because of religion, because of class, because of maybe they had some childhood traumas that said, hey, this set of people or these set of situations or circumstances are unsafe. But I don't think that people are inherently racist. I think racism is a learned behavior. And I think it's something that you're either groomed to be racist, or you've had experiences that are unfortunately negatively affect you from one population or one ethnic group of people that causes you to believe in a prejudiced way that all people from that ethnic group are like that. Yeah.
No, I would agree. I mean, look at all the, oh my gosh, I'm Italian, right? Italian and Irish. Look at how many, oh my gosh, they've been insulting and making fun of the, both the Irish and the Italians for years and years and years. I don't take it seriously. I don't wear a gold chain. Yeah. Up in New York, maybe in Brooklyn, a lot of those guys do, or speak a certain way, or think a certain way, but that doesn't mean that's me just because I'm half Italian.
But isn't that stereotyping right there?
Well, I don't know. Is it?
That every Italian wears a gold
Well, if you
chain?
go to Brooklyn, there's a lot of people that talk like this and get a slice of pizza. I can't even do it. I can't even do a New York accent.
Forget about it.
Well, maybe I could. Yeah, maybe I could.
Well, I think it's fair, right? I think it's fair to say that Vern, who represents the Italian and the Irish community, can speak to stereotypes within her community, right? I think that's fair. As a black man, I'm able to speak towards stereotypes in my community, whether I agree with them or not.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, that may not be the case, but I'm like, hey, these are the things that people believe about us. Because when we talked about grooming, sometimes you use stereotypes to groom people in order to believe in certain things about people, right? So we have to be mindful, like, hey, how do we fight back against this? Well, let's be aware of what the stereotypes are, so then we can kind of push back against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading another interesting article this morning in preparation for the show about discourse analysis and examples of it, and how and so discourse analysis is an approach to the study of language that demonstrates how language shapes reality. So it's kind of sort of what we're talking about here. The media or whatever, newspapers, people in general can demonstrate how language shapes their reality. It usually takes the form of a textual or content analysis is what it says, but, it gives some really good examples here about studying government policies. That a discourse analysis of policy text would involve looking at the keywords, metaphors, and phrases used in the text and how they reveal ideological frameworks and viewpoints of the government of the day. I kind of thought that was funny, the government of the day. These sorts of studies often demonstrate how the language of policy text normalizes some behaviors and marginalizes others. And during COVID, especially when we were at war over the COVID-19 vaccine and everything that was going on, you would hear, like I could tell people that listen to CNN and people that listen to Fox just by the words that they use, the discourse that they used, by me like analyzing it. Am I making any sense? Yeah.
100% right. Because when you're thinking about discourse analysis, you're looking at, okay, discourse analysis is essentially, to your point, saying that, hey, language is a way that we use to kind of take power and control of certain groups based on the way we say things, right? Language is used to create social constructs in reality for people. And so part of, or sometimes what you see in the media and in the news, is that they will use certain words and language to not necessarily say, hey, this group of people are wrong or this, but they will say things that will entice fear, or that will entice people to respond in certain ways. And it's basically just the way in which they are communicating these things or speaking of these things. So you can see how, when you're talking about discourse analysis, how for somebody who's not aware of what it is, for you hear people to say, well, I believe what I believe. Well, is it that you actually believe what you believe, or is it that for so long, you've only heard this one message for so long that now it has created this sense of reality for you that may not necessarily be the real reality, but it's your reality.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Marie?
It's just crazy that you can watch two news shows on the same topic and get totally different stories.
Both
it's like, when did that happen? When did they become divided like that? I thought Walter Cronkite, the whole rule of journalism is to be impartial.
Were you going to say Walter Cronkite?
Yes. Oh. Didn't I say Walter Cronkite?
You didn't finish the... Yeah. Well, I remember during the whole COVID crisis, there was one particular person in my life that started using the word hyperbole. And I'm like, oh, she's listening to CNN. Sure enough, that became like a buzzword, right? That's hyperbole. Most people never use that word in their everyday language, but during this whole political mess that we found ourselves in the last 5 years now going into, that was kind of like a buzzword. That's a good example of what, I'm talking about, which is kind of condescending too. It's like, in one word, dismissing that the other side, is wrong, that it's just hyperbole, right?
I would agree. I think that, regardless of what, political, news networks or journals or newspapers we read, sometimes what the big problem is, we're not getting both sides of the story, right? We asked a great question in the sense of how can you have one story in the news, and example, unfortunately, there was a school shooting that happened today, and unfortunately, it was in Wisconsin, and it was a kid, a middle schooler, who was going into the school with a rifle, and he was unfortunately apprehended and killed before he was able to go into a school, right? So, like, it's unfortunate that, the little kid died. Fortunate that he didn't harm anyone else. Yeah. But long story short, right, if you watch one news network, they will talk about the need for, gun control and things of that nature, right? So they're looking at the story from the lens of, hey, the issue is gun control. Mm-hmm. If you look at another story from another network, they will say, well, hold on, our teachers need to be armed. We don't need more gun control. We need to deregulate guns so more people can arm and defend themselves. And this is not a gun issue. This is a mental health issue, right? So I think what happens is they're both networks are covering the story. I think the problem is they're not covering the whole story. They're kind of only looking at the picture from their perspective. Now, I don't mind either perspective. I think the ideal way would be able to talk about all the perspectives, right? We can talk about mental health. We can talk about gun control. We can talk about all the things that are involved in the situation. I think that would be ideal as far as news reporting. Give me all the information, not just the information from your perspective. But I think, unfortunately, there are news networks that do that, and those are not the popular ones, right? Because, again, as we mentioned earlier, people want to be part of they want to be part of a team, and they don't want to know what's going on with the other team. They just want to be able to subscribe to groupthink, where I'm getting the same message over and over. It's like an echo chamber. You believe what I believe, and what we believe is true. And I think because of that, even if people were to give you the whole story, you would only hear the side that you agree with. But when it comes to the other side, you'll tune them out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many things I'm thinking of as we're going through this, and I'm loving this conversation though. I feel like it's going pretty well. I really do. Well, so would you say, DeWone, Dr. DeWone, that Americans are as polarized, that they are as polarized as everyone says they are?
I mean, I think they are. I mean, I think that obviously our issues may not be, if you look at what's going on in other parts of the world, the Middle East, and things of that nature, we may feel like our issues are minor compared to, children being bombed and things of that nature, right? Like, but I think that the problem with Americans is that for us, every little thing needs to be something that increases the divide, right? We spend a lot of time now. We're spending time on abortion's rights, and we were talking about whether we are learning about Black history and things in schools. And I mean, it's just every little thing, every little change, every little step that we take in this country. For whatever reason, there needs to be this political discourse, this argument or disagreement. And so it causes us to be divided because we're not listening to each other. And anytime you have people who are not willing to listen to each other, then yes, you will only strengthen and increase a divide, regardless of the issue. And I think in our country, because you're either on this side or that side, then you will see the divide being strengthened. Well,
I think that one thing we can all agree on is that we all want the truth, right? And I'm thinking about my favorite candidate in the presidential race, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he says that he will heal the divide in this nation, and he will do it by speaking the truth. He wants to reconcile. He wants both sides to reconcile. And his aim is to convince every Democrat that you're not just a Democrat, and that every Republican, you're not just a Republican. And I think that's a good way to think about this, because at the end of the day, we have a lot of commonality, right? We have so many things in common that we share, that we all love. We talked about that. I mean, look how many people came together for the eclipse and just enjoyed the beauty of the eclipse. They didn't sit there and decide where they were going to sit based on political party affiliation. Agreed? Right?
I would agree, right? But I believe that is a phenomenal, ideal approach to resolving the country. I think the work, though, that involves that is hard because, again, when you're raised to believe certain things, it's part of your value system. It's part of who you are. It's part of what you know, right? So it's like your religion. And so for somebody to come and say, hey, the things that you believe in may be discriminatory towards a certain group of people. How about we all come together and start treating each other like people? I think that's great. And I see a lot of it. I see areas where it happens, right? When there's a crisis, people are able to come together. But what happens is that will require regulation somehow, some way when it comes to the way we receive information. Because when COVID first happened, right, you see neighbors of all walks of life, you know, checking on people, making sure each other have water, you know, like everything. And then once it starts to become a political thing, when they start talking about vaccines and whose fault is this and is China responsibility, that's where you started to see the divide. That's when you started to see people taking their separate sides, right?
Yeah.
It's not until, you know, people start to cover it that it becomes something where people start to figure out, well, this side is right or this side is wrong. So I think the hard part of it is, one, we do need to be able to recognize and realize that we need each other more than we don't.
Absolutely.
But there's parties that make us feel like we need to choose.
Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Apologies. And did I interrupt your thought, what you were going to say?
No, Vern. You know me. I can talk forever, so you got to interrupt me to shut me up sometimes.
Well, I know this. Here's some things we can agree on, okay? I love music. Do you guys love music?
Of course.
Yes.
I love my children. Okay. Do we all love our children or our nieces and nephews, whatever that child looks like, or our furry child, right?
Yes.
We all, maybe not all of us, but some of us like some good weed or some good wine, right?
Yes.
and nature. We all love nature and the ocean. And so I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of things that, like I said, we all love together and, you know.
Well, we all want a safe and place to live. Like we all want to be able to buy food and still have some money left over for maybe, you know,
some fun.
I mean, just the basic necessities, I think, is what everybody wants, and everybody's scared of losing.
Well, government's gotten too big. I mean, they're trying to get they're in our bedrooms, you know, they're everywhere now. They are everywhere trying to tell us how we should and should not live. I'm going to take a sip. Go ahead, Marie.
But on the other hand, you have a candidate that is currently right now up against this, or to the Supreme Court, trying to get immunity as a president, like to be able to go into that office and commit crimes and not get in trouble for it.
Well, go ahead.
Which is tricky.
They're all criminals. I just want to say that. And I'm no Trump fan. I'm not. But I'm not a Trump hater either. You know, some of the things that he did, you know, like
rape.
No. Well, okay. Yeah. Well, I know a lot of guys that have raped. I'll just say that are in positions, very high positions all over the world. There's, so
it's not that bad.
Again. No, I'm not saying it's not that bad. Rape is never good.
We don't agree with them, and we don't agree with what they've done. Obviously, it's just understanding that. Here's the thing about this, right? When I remember watching sports growing up, right? And you would always hear about the player who got the DUI and the person who got the DUI. And, you know, in a lot of cases, it was always, you know, a black man, and they would make this big thing going on ESPN. It's like, well, what example is he being to the kids? And he needs to be a better example to the kids because he's an athlete and people look up to him. My problem sometimes with us in this country is we have higher expectations for athletes than we do for people who are in position of power to lead this country, right? Yeah. And so I believe this. You know, I think that there was a point in time where in order to be a president, then you had to have a publicly, at least publicly, you had to have a very clean rap sheet, right? Right. Like you had to be very. I remember all the movies when we were growing up where they were training their kids to be, you know, president. They had to talk a certain way and they had to carry themselves a certain way. I think that unfortunately, when people see some of our current candidates that are, whether they've been president before or current president, I think they look at them like, hold on, these people don't represent people in the way that makes us feel this person can be a good leader, right? Because they've made several hurtful decisions in their life that affected other people. I think that's where the issue becomes about what type of representation do we want as leaders.
Yeah. And what were we going to say?
We need someone with a moral compass, essentially.
Yeah.
That just knows right and wrong.
Is that even possible in politics anymore? I mean, seriously, it's such a filthy game. I've heard a lot of conversations about a lot of different things, especially in the last few months. And, that's why it's funny. I'm almost, I'm a little afraid to even say how I really feel about things. Because then again, you're going to be held accountable for everything that comes out of your mouth. But I just think that we need to quit hating. We need to quit hating. And no one lives in a glass house, right? Or what's that expression? Don't throw stones. And you know what I'm talking about? Living in, my father used to say it, but no one is perfect. Is rape okay? Hell no. Rape's not okay. And no, I don't think that he's the best guy to be our president. I'm speaking about former President Donald Trump, but he did do some things correctly and he did some things really wrong. I think every president does. It's the toughest job in the world. Can you imagine being the leader of the United States of America, especially in the mess that we have found ourselves in, by all the corruption that has been allowed for decades and the lies? Everybody just wants the truth. We can agree on that. Agreed?
Well, Bern, I agree. And I love this platform because it's a podcast so we can speak freely.
Yeah.
I think that I do believe that we all say we want the truth, but I think that COVID showed us that when you give people the truth, they panic, right? And so I always use this example in therapy when I'm talking to people, right? We don't know how many times we have been since, we don't know in the last 20, 30 years how many times we've been a threat for a nuclear war. We don't know how many times somebody has shot missiles at us in this country and they were able to shoot them down over the Atlantic. They don't come out and say, hey, there were 40 missiles that were on their way to D.C. and we shot them down over the Atlantic. Because if you told people that every single time, they would constantly be in panic. Everybody would have bunkers under their home. We would be in a constant state of fear. So I do think that to a certain degree, our Republicans have a job our politicians have a job to protect us mentally and emotionally, right? I think that's a responsibility that they have. And sometimes part of that responsibility is not always telling us where the dangers are, especially if the dangers have been resolved. I say that to say that we want people who are honest and we want people who have a moral compass and we want them to not be selfish. I think when you're a leader, you have to be selfless. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, which is one of the reasons I love RFK Jr. so much. I really do. And people can, bring up, things about his past too. You probably could about each and every one of us, really, at the end of the day. There's no perfection out there. The human race is flawed. It really is. And not in sync with nature. And I could go on and on about that, what we've done to our environment, what the government has allowed these big corporations to do. Oh my God. Like it's just unbelievable. And it's a big mess. And like I said, it's easy to be an armchair quarterback. Okay. For anybody to sit there. Right. I love that term because, it's like watching a football game and he throws an interception and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. And you're losing your mind. Right. Put yourself in that position with a stadium full of hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people, right? And no pressure. And you're trying to win this game at all costs. And, we don't know what it's like to hold that job until we've done it. Or as my dad used to say, unless you've walked in somebody's shoes, don't judge them. Do I think Donald Trump grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth? Absolutely. Do I think he thinks that he's smarter and better than everybody else? Absolutely. But I feel the same way about Joe Biden. I think they're both the same. I do.
I think that's the problem, right? Is that have we gotten to this point, right? We started talking about like extremism in this country and the psychological effects of it and the black, the white, right? The right or the wrong. I think the reality of it is like, how have we gotten to a place as people where we're willing to accept less than standards for leadership?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's really the issue, right? Because again, we expect more from our professional athletes to be role models and examples. I never got why a professional athlete needs to be more of an example than somebody who is in real leadership positions, right? Who sign papers and documents to make real decisions, right? But that when you desensitize them as leaders and you use certain language to say, okay, well, this person, they're humans, and yes, we make mistakes. And to be honest with you, I think the best leaders are people who have made mistakes, right? I think the issue becomes that we're not holding people accountable. That yes, just because you have privilege doesn't mean you need to use your privilege in a harmful way.
Absolutely. In fact, it should be the polar opposite. I think if you're lucky enough to be born into a family of prestige and wealth, you need to, there's a responsibility that comes with that kind of privilege, right? And connections and everything that goes along with it. But I don't know, our society is really effed up. It really is, in so many ways, of how we're so money motivated and connection motivated. Like, oh, who do I know? Who do they know? And I mean, gosh, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here, except that it's pretty disappointing as just a regular American citizen looking out at the terrain, for lack of a better word, and trying to navigate, where do I go next? What do we do next as a nation? And, and I actually heard from somebody yesterday who said that there are people out there that have really cool solutions, good solutions, solid solutions to a lot of our problems, a lot of environmental problems, overpopulation problems, if that's even real. You don't even have to question that. Are we overpopulated as a world? Where does that come from? And is it true? Have you ever asked yourself that?
Well, let's think about that, right, Bern? Because there are a lot of people who have really good ideas that are very smart, they're very intelligent. They're trying their best not to be biased based on a political agenda. They're trying their best not to be influenced by money. They're just good, wholesome people with good, wholesome ideas for growth and responsibility. The problem sometimes leads to that, okay, we as people, right? Let's look at this. You have Republican and you have Democrats, right? And then you have your independent. Because people sometimes view is, okay, you have to be a Republican or you have to be a Democrat. Well, if you're independent, we don't know what side you stand on. So just because we don't know what side you stand on, you can have the best ideas in the world, right? You can have a plan that really helps 85, 90% of the population. And just because they don't know your allegiance, people won't support you. And if you are turning down corporate money, people won't support you because they feel like they can't buy you or own you. And I think that becomes a problem, is that psychologically, we have people, because we don't want to really think and process information, let me be part of something that can process and think for me, right? You're going to make it easy for me to think because I know what color your hat is.
Wow. There's a lot of cool stuff. One of the things I heard about yesterday, that there's technology out there that it's making water out of thin air, like taking the water that's in the air and turning it. It's like 100% sustainable and recyclable and all these things, but they pull it. It's this really brilliant guy. I can't talk out of school here, but just stuff that I've been privileged to reading recently, and building homes out of 3D printers.
Yeah, that's cool.
Cool stuff like that. But it takes a lot of money to make that kind of fund, a lot of funding to make those ideas come to fruition. And we keep sending money over to continue wars that we don't need to be in. I don't know.
I think that first invention is called rain.
Well, I mean, on this topic, I guess a good question that I may ask you, if I may, is how do you think that capitalism influences stuff like that? Because if you think about it, right, let's say, somebody can build a 3D home, right? And with materials, labor, all that, you realize that, this only costs $30,000-$40,000 to build a person a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, right?
Yeah.
Now, due to our desire to be the wealthiest people in the world, somebody is going to say, well, instead of us charging $30,000, we want our shareholders to get $1 million bonuses. And now that 3D home that costs $30,000 to make with labor, all that, people are selling them for $250,000, right? That the desire to be super wealthy and super rich sometimes, or not sometimes, a lot of times can overwrite just doing good for people and making things that are cost efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there's a lot of great technologies out there and a lot of great minds that are inventing all kinds of things, but we have to be open to it too. And we have to get these corporations out of our politics. You know, these corporations control our country. We saw that during COVID, what was going on with the whole vaccine issue. I mean, it was so in our face, and yet we refuse to believe it, because people want to, you want to believe your government. You want to believe your doctors, right? But even they are controlled by the American Medical Association. There's just too much corruption in our world, and I don't know how we get rid of it. I really don't. Washington needs cleaned up, first of all. And you remember that
Wall Street, I think,
and Wall Street, right up there with them. Absolutely. I could tell some Wall Street stories. I'd probably get sued, but I could tell some stories like really, really bad ones about these big corporations and these private equity companies and these hedge funds and some of the stuff that they do to
manipulate it.
Yeah,
it's just,
freaking ridiculous what they get away with. They do, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That's what's happening in our country right now. I mean, look at the housing crisis that we have. My daughter, who's 28 years old, and her boyfriend, they can barely afford to buy a house, you know, and that's not the way it should be. And they're both college educated, by the way, and it shouldn't be that way. So I don't know. We have a lot of work that needs to be done. And you've got 2 children now, DeWone. Do you worry about their future?
Yes. Yeah, I worry about it, but here's the thing with me. Like, personally, I try not to operate from fear, because I think that fear can really take over your life and limit you and your ability to do things.
Yep.
So yes, I think as any parent, we're always worried about our kids' future. What are they going to be? Will they have enough money for this and that? But I try not to let it control my behaviors. I try to just kind of have a plan of kind of things that I want to do to put my kids in healthier situations, but also understand that some of their necessary growth that for my children is going to be to fall a little bit and to make some mistakes. So thinking about them buying homes, I'm like, well, yes, but also hopefully they get careers that are, really good. And then, buying a home for them may not be such a difficult journey. Mm-hmm. Well, at some point.
Yeah. And I don't know. I do believe hopefully things will if they don't, we'll go to war. History will repeat itself. And I believe that we're very close to a revolution in this country if things don't start turning around and we get some good leadership. But let me ask you this, to go back to the, how to navigate through the political war between the left and the right and the black and the white. Why do some people not respect political or personal boundaries and they get so crazy when they're talking about politics?
Ern, I think that because, again, politics is such an emotional thing for people. I think what happens is our emotions sometimes can blind our logic, right? And I think that when you think about why people, in some cases, vote the way they do, it's because there is something that's affecting them. If you think about, South Dakota, North Dakota, these different places where they're dealing with pipeline issues and things of that nature, where people's, historic native lands are being disrupted and things of that nature. That's a very emotional thing. For some people, it may seem simple, like, hey, they're just building a highway or they're just building this, but this is my home, right? When you talk about the development of metropolitan areas and cities growing and, taking over farmland and things of that nature, or the need to build bullet trains and things of that nature, cutting into people's land. I can see why those things and voting for certain things can be so emotionally triggering for people, because it does affect their lifestyle, the things that they worked hard for. Mm-hmm. I think that's why you see people who can be very selfish and very blind, and because there's some type of emotional thing that's connected to them that evokes that reaction and that response.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And so what's the best way? Because we want to wrap this up here. What is the best way, DeWone, Dr. D, to handle extremism in politics? And how do each of us help keep the peace and find resolution in our toughest problems as a nation and as a world?
I think Vern, I think, to be honest with you, we just got to be okay with like listening to each other. I think that we have to be able to teach more and provide more education in schools about, what's going on, policies, actions, what's happening in different parts of the world and different parts of the country. So one, we got to be able to properly educate people and not just educate them based on what we think people should hear. But then we also got to be able to listen. I have to be able to understand and connect with, hey, I've lived in metropolitan areas and cities my whole life. If I'm not listening to the experiences of somebody who's grew up in rural America and understanding why they value living in rural areas and the culture and things of that nature, if I'm not willing to listen to them, why should I believe they should be willing to listen to me? So one, let's be educated about the different experiences and the different cultures and things that are happening in this country. But also, once we're able to learn and educate ourselves, let's open up our ears and close our mouths so we can have a better understanding of what people are suffering and going through.
Oh, man, I really like that. Don't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. And any final thoughts, DeWone, as we're getting ready to wind this down?
No, I think that I say no and then I start talking. I think there are aspects of this topic that are very psychologically evoking for people. It's obviously Mental Health Awareness Month. So if you find yourself in situations where it's hard for you to watch the news or TV just because there's so much political discourse, go out, find somebody you can talk to, join a support group, go get counseling, and discuss these things because your opinion, your views, they matter.
Mm-hmm. And volunteer. If there's something you don't like in the world, get out there and volunteer and try and change it. Agreed? That's a good place to start.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because you get one life. All right, DeWone, Dr. DeWone Bennett, everyone. You can find him at dbennettcounseling.com. That's dbennettcounseling.com or on Instagram at d.bennett_counseling. That's Instagram at d.bennett_counseling. Thank you so much, Dr. DeWone Bennett. Take care.
Dr. D.
Dr. D. Love you, man.
Thank you guys for having me. Have a great one.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.